The Nigerian President, Muhammadu Buhari, has highlighted the economic development of the country at the Nigerian International Partnership Forum. Buhari identified opportunities for critical investment at the event held in Paris ahead of the Peace Forum, which allowed participants and stakeholders to provide perspectives and guidance for mobilizing capital flows for the vital funding needed in the development of Nigeria. Arise International correspondent Adefemi Akisonya reports.
The relationship between Nigeria and France has the ability to boost Nigeria's development. At the Nigeria International Partnership Forum in Paris, the Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari called on investors to take advantage of the vast investment partnership on offer.
Investing in humanity is investing in our collective survival. With this in mind, we have incorporated the public-private partnership model into our economic recovery plan to attract private sector participation in the financing and operations of critical economic and social infrastructure. This measure is already helping to mitigate COVID-19 triggered capital flight and decline in grant and development financing.
The French government, too, excited about mutual opportunities to be had with an economic relationship with Nigeria.
Nigeria has huge opportunities for French companies, and in the same way, we have many opportunities for Nigerian investors and companies in France. And so this kind of forum, of summit, is very important. And I thank the Nigerian government to have organized this forum here in Paris, because I'm sure that it will be fruitful. And it will create some strong partnership between our companies in the long term, win-win partnerships. And we have many, many different sectors in which we could do much better together. And so I'm very happy to have participated to this forum today. And sure, in the future, we will see more and more Nigerian and French partnerships.
There were 4 plenary sessions, including discussions on security, infrastructure, and Nigeria's investment climate. The second discussion focused on Nigeria's economic outlook, rethinking trade, development, and financial inclusion in Nigeria.
If you do think about investing in Africa, and we know, and today people are talking about what are the next frontiers for development and opportunities in the world. Africa holds the best frontiers for development in the world today. Your yield from investments is today the highest in Africa. And I would say this, and please pardon me if I say so. People are saying Nigerians should take the lead. And truly, yes, Nigerians should take the lead. But I'm saying to you, the foreign investor, if you think about Africa being the next frontier for opportunities and development in Africa, you do not have a choice. You will have to look at Nigeria.
Present too at the discussion were French entrepreneurs already committed to investing in Nigeria.
We do pay-as-you-go for cooking gas. So each and every Nigerian can refill his cylinder with 200 naira, 400 naira, and start moving from charcoal or fuel wood into clean cooking. And we went to this event because we launched a subsidiary in Abuja to be able to deploy this pay-as-you-gas technology. And that's we are a French startup, and Nigeria was obviously the market to be and to come. I grew up and live in 25 countries in Africa, and Nigeria has always been very fascinating. First, like every country, you need to respect people. Respect, understand the culture, and come with trust.
It was one of the wonderful events for Nigeria actually to introduce himself to us as investors and French investors actually. But what I can say, on 18 years experience that we have expanding business into Africa, we now actually are looking at Nigeria as a fast-growing economic countries. Now we're focusing with our boundary of investors on 250,000 social houses that we're going to Delta State to develop. Actually, it was a great opportunity for me to see the minister here today. So because it was a little bit of blocking on the way, but I hope with the blessing of the minister and our President Buhari, we will go through by next month we come into Nigeria. We need actually to see how can we develop the social houses for our people.
Nigeria's Ogun State is already home to many international businesses, and its governor says its arms are open for more investment.
We'd like to say that something new is happening in Ogun State. And we believe that with what we are doing, where we are building an agro-cargo airport, which will be ready third, fourth quarter next year, which we'll call our Metropolis, because it has the airport, it has a special agro-processing zone that's been supported by the African Finance Development Bank. It has the first African International Standards Testing Center that's being built by the Afro-Exim Bank. It's going to have an Air Force base, so we call it an Metropolis. With something like that happening in Ogun State, where Ogun State known as having the highest number of reserves in terms of you have rubber plantations, palm oil plantations, cocoa plantations, the number one producer of cassava, number one producer of poultry, number one producer of eggs. The entire agro value chain now becomes an ecosystem where you can produce in Ogun State, you can process in our airport, and you can export from Ogun State. So we like to say, definitely something is happening in Ogun State. If you are not in Ogun State, you are definitely not in Nigeria.
Well, at the close of the Nigeria International Partnership Forum, conversations have been had, but in order for deals to be made, indeed, Nigeria must continue progressing towards having a conducive environment for that investment so that the country can continue to develop and reach its potential. Adefemi Akinsanya, Arise News, Paris.
All right, a lot about investment, Tundu.
Yes, and it's looking all rather successful, isn't it? I think President Buhari is very good at these investment pitches. We heard one recently when he went to Riyadh and Davos in the desert, or so it's called. So this was a similar speech, and I felt it was effective. He talked about what Nigeria has been able to accomplish under his administration and where they're hoping to go in terms of infrastructure, health, tourism, what have you. The CBN was also able to really, pat themselves on the back for managing to launch the e-Naira, which is important. The 3 PSB licenses have been issued. So it all sounds great, but I do hope that it's just beyond, Giorgio, and there's actually some investment in Nigeria, which exactly is the whole point of this exercise. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, this doesn't look new to me. Over the years, the Nigerian government has been going abroad to sell the country. And that process had always been led by every president. The president of Nigeria being the chief, foreign affairs officer of the country. And it's good to see that President Buhari has sustained this, even at what looks like a slightly higher tempo. You mentioned Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, where there was that Financial Investment Initiative Summit, where President Buhari used the opportunity to strike the same note, to sell Nigeria as an important investment destination. He did the same thing, I think, at the COP26 in Glasgow, to say, look, Nigeria is an important destination for investment and for partnership. And now it's gone to France. France used to be a major destination for Nigeria in selling, opportunities in Nigeria to parts of Europe. The other one we used to do was this meeting always led in England, in London, by Baroness Linda Chalker. I don't know whether that is still on. So I like the confidence, that the administration continues to demonstrate. And, President Buhari, apart from being the chief foreign policy officer, has also demonstrated that he's also the chief trade and investment officer of Nigeria. That's understandable. The buck stops at his desk. And in his speech, he, talked about all the opportunities that are available here, particularly ease of doing business, particularly the friendly environment that he talked about. And it was followed up by the CBN governor, who provided the necessary statistics. And I was quite impressed with all the statements. Now, the second thing is that this particular summit in France, would deepen relationship between Nigeria and France and other international partners, because there were partners there from the African Union, from regional countries, including Chad, and also from the United Nations. The third point, in my view, has to do with the fact that Nigeria is beginning to look beyond the pandemic, as other countries of the world are doing. Other countries of the world are saying, okay, before the pandemic, there were issues. During the pandemic, there were issues. Now, to drive economic growth, what do we do going forward? And it's not something you can do in an insular manner. You need ideas from other parts of the world. And I hope, that this has been a very fruitful session. I've always made a point. The only problem we have in Nigeria is the ability to follow through, to follow up. We do all these big events, we get commitments from people, but when we come back home, all the relevant departments, they drop the ball. So the thing becomes a jamboree, and that's why you find analysts saying, look, we just like to travel and talk. No, we should go beyond the talk. We should follow up with actionable plans. And I guess, maybe we can modify our affairs in that regard because of the very heavy private sector presence at this particular summit in Paris, where even if government drops the ball, I don't think that all those heavyweights from the Nigerian private sector will not pay more attention to opportunities. And it was also good to see states, also represented. And one big takeaway for me, which I can, reiterate, is a statement by the governor of Ogun State that, you have to come to Ogun State in Nigeria to invest. Otherwise, you have not yet visited Nigeria. Given the great opportunities, that are available in Ogun State. And I hope that Governor Abiodun will follow through by making sure that the right structures are in place. Other issues discussed at that summit are relevant. Security. Yes, the president and the CBN governor may have promised heaven and earth, but I think that the international community will also be concerned about the security situation in Nigeria, and we need to address that. Although I'm aware that persons from chambers of commerce that have been here on this program, they often tell us that security is not a problem, that investors don't bother about security. But, well, perhaps what we're looking for is not just FDI, but also local investment and the ease of doing business in terms of its linkages with the environment of doing business. Otherwise, I think it was a great outing, but we'd like to look forward to specific outcomes beyond the talk.
So no pun intended. I think what the governor just said, Ogun State is the gateway to Nigeria.
Well, so it is.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mati Anton, for that. That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll have Rotus Odiri, Michael Wilson, and this one, Boro, and Aaron Akejola to give us updates on Africa, global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. Our dependable Rotus Odiri is here to give us an African business update.
Good morning, Tundu, Rufai, Doctor, all our viewers. So the Federal Executive Council yesterday approved President Buhari's, $16 billion and about $16 billion and about 1.2 or 1.02 billion euro borrowing plan. Part of the external 2018 through 2022 external borrowing plan. As far as where the money is going to come from, as far as the $16 billion portion, $16.2 billion portion, 3.5 billion from the World Bank, 5 billion from the China Exim Bank, 3.9 billion from the Industrial Commercial Bank of China, another 2.8 billion from the China Development Bank, China everywhere, and then 698 million from the African Development Bank. On the European side, President Buhari is in France to just play that package there from Adifemi. So the French Development Agency is coming up with about 345 million. The European Investment Bank, another 175 million. So, I mean, again, in line with the provisions of the existing acts for him to seek approval from the National Assembly, that was approved. The funds, of course, will be deployed to various projects that need development. Also, at the Federal Executive Council, that was the Senate that approved this loan. For the Federal Executive Council, they've approved a national 5-year development plan. This is a sequel to the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. I think they're looking for 348 trillion naira over the next 5 years. They're forecasting GDP growth of 5% annually for the next 5 years. Your guess is as good as mine where that growth comes from, considering that there's an election coming up soon, and that typically stalls needed reforms. So, on that end, that's, again, you need a national development plan. You need an outlay as to where you want to go. So I think they're hinging much of that on oil prices, which, as you've seen, have appreciated in the last couple months, over $80 a barrel. Hopefully, if that is sustained, plus expected foreign direct investment. You saw President Buhari speaking there in France about how the business environment is receptive to FDI. So that's on the development plan. For the currency, the naira actually appreciated to about 535 on the parallel market. It's been attributed to CBN interventions in the market. I mean, you heard Governor Mefele there in Paris talking about how foreign reserves are now at about 40 billion. He's forecasting that foreign reserves should rise to about 42 or so by early next year. Again, that's on the back of the proceeds from the Euro bonds that we've received, and I guess also the SDR, special drawing rights from the IMF as well. So being able to pump foreign exchange into the market. I mean, remember, after the whole Aboki FX thing, and then the BDCs leaving, the parallel market was about 570, 575. And I did check this with at least one BDC that sent that rates to me. So good sign there. On the official exchange rates on the INE window, I think we're about 414 naira to the dollar. To the African Energy Week in South Africa, Bosun Amofaye spoke with the NJ Ayuk, who is the executive chair of the African Energy Chamber. He was in the red tie to your right. He was talking about the fact that the energy transition that folks keep talking about, as the three of you expressed here on Monday, it's not going to be short term. It's going to take some time, and he says there needs to be more action than talk behind it. He also talked about the need, Africa's plans to escape quote-unquote energy poverty by 2030. And interestingly enough, something Rufai said yesterday about how do climate activists expect Africa to just dump a bunch of deals. Kenya's national oil company, the equivalent of Nigeria's NNPC, is planning on taking a $1 billion stake in a Tolo energy pipeline. I think it's about 3.5. An energy project in Kenya is about $3.5 billion worth of oil that's been discovered that they want to export. So, to Rufai's point yesterday, how do you expect Kenya to just dump that plan because of climate activists? So that's the latest update from Africa Energy Week. It ends tomorrow, actually. Yeah. So, and then in Tunisia, the powerful, you've heard this story before, powerful labor union. Okay, so that's, excuse that. This is, we're talking about Tunisia now, and the UGTT, which is a labor union that is one of the most powerful labor unions in Tunisia. They have rejected IMF reforms. Tunisia, of course, hit hard by COVID-19, looking for relief from the IMF. Egypt got their relief years ago. Egypt agreed to the reforms. There was a lot of political social economic tensions from that. So the labor union, you've heard this before. No, do not remove subsidies. No, do not raise taxes, and so on and so forth. The standard procedure. So those talks are still ongoing.
So, I mean, great point you made about energy transition. Because you see, when we go to all those things like COP, we don't tell ourselves the truth. We lie to ourselves. And I keep saying, that was the same lie they told to Nigeria in the 50s, in the atomic age, while Nigeria dropped coal when it found crude oil.
They also said to COP26, they're talking about exiting coal, which is
which is almost impossible, because I still feel, why did Nigeria drop coal? We have one of the biggest mines out of Enugu, Colliery Mine, in Iva Valley. And we dropped that, to be able to power industries and the likes, and we just transited to oil. And it affected us greatly, because the reason why we couldn't continue with those rail trains to carry goods and stuff, because most of them were coal-based trains. Right. And there's some other forms of energy we could have used coal for. So let me bust your bubble, Rotus. Yeah. Japan, Fukushima happened a couple of years back.
The nuclear
meltdown, reactor.
Right? Yeah.
But Japan is still trying to go back to nuclear. And in the next 20, 30 years, nuclear will still make about 22% of Japan's energy mix. And that's a developed nation. Right. In fact, that's the nation where the first agreement was signed in Kyoto in 97.
So you can't just abandon it.
You can't just abandon it. So one thing we don't talk about enough is the energy mix. And for IMF, I'd say the alarmist was, a lot of people will say, it's not alarmist, it's been the truth. The IMF has started again. Let me quote Julius Nyerere, former president of Tanzania. He says, the IMF, International Ministry of Finance. And that's what they want to do. You teleguide people, help them make wrong decisions that never allow their lives remain the same again.
Yeah, but Rufai,
let them find their own path.
But you have to reduce, you have to eliminate, well, not eliminate, you have to reduce subsidies if you want to get a country back.
You have to reduce subsidies.
You got to raise taxes.
I'm not saying don't reduce subsidies, I'm not saying don't raise taxes.
Yeah.
But all of this is for the benefit of the IMF against these countries. these lower countries. So we can have this long conversation about their
The big issue in Tunisia is not even about IMF. It's about the political crisis in the country.
Yes.
And the fact that the Union Générale Tunisienne du Travail, that's the General Union of Tunisian Workers, is a very powerful political force in Tunisia. And the workers are saying that the country is facing, yes, economic crisis, political turmoil. In July, President Said decided to dissolve parliament and sack the prime minister. There's a new prime minister in place. Since April, the UGTT have been negotiating with government about reforms in Tunisia. They've not made headway on that. As of Wednesday, that would be yesterday, there were protests on the streets of Sifas and some other parts of Tunisia over the killing of a 35-year-old man who was said to have been tear gas. And so the UGTT, remember I said it's a very powerful political force, is saying they do not want a situation whereby you impose greater hardship on the people, either by raising prices or removing subsidy. But I see that the subject is familiar because also here in Nigeria, we're concerned about subsidies, about recommendations from the IMF or even the Bretton Woods institutions generally. But many of our countries in Africa are vulnerable. The situation is so uncertain, and because of that, we find ourselves in this terrible bind because you have to go and borrow money from international finance institutions. Now, the other point you raised about Nigeria's development plan, a 5-year plan, that's supposed to replace the ERGP. It's a medium-term plan, but by the time it runs out, another government will be in place. So what is the guarantee that this development plan, will be observed? What is the funding strategy for it? Okay, even if the next government takes ownership of it, okay? What is the guarantee that, they will implement it? Implementation is always a problem in Nigeria. They are looking for 348.7 trillion naira. So the big question, where is that funding going to come from? Exactly. Finally, as for the naira, yes, we're told, you are right, you say CBN intervention. We have seen the CBN yesterday, Emefiele was talking about external reserve improving to about $40 billion. There's been an upsurge in the spot price of crude oil, so that has helped. The CBN also adopted certain policies, shut out the BDCs, and tried to avoid speculation. So it's a demand and supply thing. We've seen it before under the Emir of Kano, Sanusi, Lamido Sanusi, when he tried to stabilize that forex regime. Okay, would Emefiele's CBN, will he be able to sustain this improvement that we have seen within the forex market?
That is the question. Tundu?
Right. I recall former Minister of Finance, Kemi Adeosun, bemoaning the fact that Nigeria could not get international funding to leverage our huge coal deposits. It just was not forthcoming. So she felt that we were being frustrated in that regard. And I completely understand that. I remember that throughout every COP24, COP26, it always comes to my mind that this is such a shame. Look at all the development, all the money we left on the table, missing that huge trick. And it's really unfortunate that this has happened. However, while we talk about how things have to be balanced and, investment opportunities cannot just be rejected, we also have to remember that we're looking at an apocalyptic event, really. The whole world will come to an end. I mean, I don't know, I don't mean to scare anybody, but have you read? I know, it just will. I read this book, Cormac McCarthy's The Road, which I recommend. I'll never read it again. It's one of those books you read it and you stare at a wall for like an hour. What will happen to this world at the rate that we're going? It is going to be a problem and it will affect us, as usual, the worst. Now, the Senate approving alone, well, of course they did. And when you look at what projects were approved, it does make you wonder. Of a standard gauge rail, that's not surprising, but additional funding for COVID-19 recovery, I always worry about that because we've seen the massive corruption that goes on with regards to COVID-19 and all that swept under the carpet under that ban, and I really wonder exactly where that money is going.
It's a good question. It's a good question.
Thank you, Rotus.
Thank you, sir.
We'll see you again tomorrow morning.
Certainly.
Moving on to more business updates, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Morning. Asia stocks very mixed, really. Some news about Evergrande, though. Those shares surging. I'll come on to that in a moment. Shares of Asia Pacific stocks mixed, basically, as well as, of course, a big inflation spike that we saw in the United States yesterday. Again, more on that in a moment. So, just to Evergrande, surged about 5.49% on reports from a Chinese media outlet that several bondholders had received coupon payments from Evergrande. Other real estate stocks in Hong Kong rose. China Vanke gaining over 3, Country Garden up 2.25. Again, generally speaking, mainland Chinese stocks higher too. We should note that Japan, we're talking about this with Reuters later on, Japan producer prices at the highest in 40 years. Employment in Australia, though, fell unexpectedly by 46,300. Far off the 50,000 rise that the markets had expected. Now, to go on to JD.com, it's planning to boost its overseas investment to tap international users. International expansion from both JD and also Alibaba could well challenge the commercial dominance of Amazon in certain parts of the world. Of course, it's Chinese Singles Today. It's one of these events that e-commerce firms offer huge discounts is underway. As far as COP26 is concerned, a cautious welcome for this very unexpected US-China climate agreement. The EU and the UN described the move as an encouraging, important step. Greenpeace predictably said both countries needed to show more commitment. The US and China are the biggest CO2 emitters in the world. And of course, Joe Biden and his Chinese counterpart are now expected to have a virtual talk as early as next week. So let us then return to Wall Street and what happened yesterday. Consumer Prices Index up 6.2% in October, a huge amount there. US stock futures steady in overnight trade. Of course, most stocks fell yesterday as a result of this. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 240 points. Meta platforms like Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Microsoft and Alphabet all closed lower as well, as you'd expect. President Biden has said, unsurprisingly, that energy prices are driving all this up, baseline, and he's directed his National Economic Council to reduce these costs. However, we always talk about inflation on this program. Let me just posit something to you. Maybe this is a spike and not part of an underlying trend, because the Baltic Dry Index, which is a popular measure of global shipping, is actually having a steep decline at the moment. So while inflation is high, this could suggest that freight costs and import inflation will reduce. I'll just throw that into the mix. I'm just saying that this is one of the, when you actually look at the detail of things actually going on, it's not all as it seems, which is usually what life's all about, isn't it? Elon Musk selling about $5 billion worth of Tesla stock. Again, did he know that when he canvassed his Twitterati that he was going to do this? And was it a fait accompli? And, that's the question I'd be asking about this. Nevertheless, he sold that and he'll be paying a big tax bill. EV startup, electric vehicle startup Rivian. I was talking about that to you yesterday. $86 billion. That's what it was valued at on the NASDAQ. It's now worth, at its opening price at least, more than Ford and General Motors. Google has lost its antitrust battle with the EU. The court's saying there it upholds the 2017 order to pay a £2.8 billion fine. It can be appealed and taken to the US, the EU's highest court, and it's not the first time this has happened. And of course, this will reverberate not just around the world, but particularly around the EU's 27 member nations who will support this. The UK political crisis, back to the UK, continues. Boris Johnson has defended the principle of MPs having a second job and is insisting that the UK is not corrupt. This is after the footage which apparently showed Sir Geoffrey Cox, who was a former Attorney General, using his House of Commons office for legal work that he got paid thousands of pounds for. And there was a resignation yesterday. Andrew Bowie quit as the Vice Chairman of the party. As far as another tradition is concerned, this is Marks and Spencer's, doing actually quite well. This is food, though, not clothes, and expect that growth will be slightly crimped next year and shipping costs will increase. But pre-tax profits up about 17.9%, which is no bad thing. Staying with products, this is much more higher end stuff now. Bentley cars, a very high end luxury car brand, as you know, enjoying some of its best years, sold a record of 11,200 units in 2020. And also it is trying to become an electric car manufacturer completely by 2025. Just finally, UK, as expected, Q3 slowed in the third quarter. A lot of boost out from the end of the pandemic in the second quarter, but the third quarter actually slowed quite considerably, only growing 1.3%. That's the global view.
All right, Michael. Yesterday, I asked you a question about China. When will China come clean? You said maybe till thy kingdom come. But guess what? China is coming clean now. We're beginning to see the numbers. What are the numbers? Factory gate inflation at the rise in China. CPI numbers going up in China. That's not looking good. Inflation is biting deep. Some say it's because of the power cuts they had recently in the transition of the power module in China. That might be the case. Secondly, out of America, CPI numbers, all-time high in 30 years. Inflation is on the increase. The central banks, I'm sure they are not seeing these numbers. What's your take on those things, Michael?
First of all, China, I'm never sure, really. I mean, you may be right. Who knows? I honestly don't know. As you know, I treat everything we get out of China with a lot of caution until we actually get the figures coming clean. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe they are. Maybe there's something in this COP26 agreement between the United States and China. But why would China, A, not go to the conference, B, just say it supports it, and C, having it's looking at other nations and saying, hang on a second, we are still a developing nation as far as the rest of the world's concerned, and so we need our growth, we need our industrial revolution, which it hasn't got at the moment. It's a deeply fragmented country. At the one end, it's got a crackdown on high-tech stuff. At the other end, it's still got peasants out in the country. What's all that about? No, I don't think it's actually coming clean. I think it will be affected by inflation in the way that every other country is. Now, to inflation and to the United States, yes, we got those very hot figures yesterday. I was merely trying to point out that one indicator, which is a very important one, which is about supply chains, and it's the Baltic Dry Index, has seen a sharp decline in freight prices. Now, this is an important forward indicator, always has been, always will be. It's one of those absolutely fundamental things. If the price of freighting goes down, then you can assume that supply costs will also go down. All I'm suggesting is this may have another aspect to what we're seeing inflation. Is it transitory? Is this a spike? Or is it something which is underlying everything? And at the moment, I'm suggesting that evidence, which is coming from the Baltic Dry Index, nothing to do with the basket of goods from which the CPI is calculated in the United States. It is a reliable, and always has been, a reliable forward indicator of freight costs. And as I say, it's dropping down. I throw this into the mix. I don't know what the answers are. I can only throw it into the mix as an observer.
Well, Michael, there's been a lot of skepticism about the future of electric vehicles. But yesterday, we had this information that Rivian, the second major electric car maker, vehicle maker in the United States, had its shares jumping up by about 30%. And that is backed, it has support from Ford and Amazon, and that this may have been, responsible for this sudden appreciation. Does this say something about the future of electric vehicles, particularly in the United States and elsewhere? And, would this particular company, Rivian, named after the Indian River, be able to sustain it? Now, the second issue, Elon Musk has sold a fifth of his shares following that, Twitter stunt, which is 63 million followers. But what we have seen is that really it's actually a stunt, because regulatory filings for the sale of a fifth of his shares. Had been fired long before, and there is no indication that he intends to sell more. Is it just playing games, with the public, or there is some sincerity here that you can find on the part of the world's richest man?
Elon Musk first. If I were following the story and had the time, then I would be asking the question that I asked in my report. Did he actually know before he contacted all his supporters on Twitter that he was going to sell some of these shares and then took the other thing? In other words, was he voluntarily offering tax as he says he is, or did he sell some in any case? I think he did. I think this was well known in September, actually, if you look at the records. But again, I don't know the detail, but that's the question I'm asking. How much of it was down to the will of his supporters, as it were, and how much of it is down to him knowing more or less exactly what he was doing? I suspect, because I'm a natural cynic, it's the latter, but who knows? That's how I'd be following it. As far as EVs are concerned, yes. I mean, look, Wall Street tends to surge ahead, doesn't it? People like these kind of valuations, and why wouldn't they? Because money's quite cheap at the moment. Sure, the valuation of the company is there, but go to Middle America. Send your reporters to Middle America and say, are you going to buy an electric car in the near future? And they will say to you, how much? How much is it? And where's the plug-in point? In Dakota, for example. Is that I'm sure it's the future. It's a question of the speed of adoption. It's nothing to do with stock prices, and it's nothing to do with IPOs in the United States. We know that Wall Street surges ahead of Main Street all the time. We know there's a gap between the two. I would suggest it's positive, certainly, for electric vehicles, in the same way that the Bentley news is positive. But as I always say, it's always down to price, down to availability, and it's down to the infrastructure being able to plug in to one's car when you've done the requisite amount of miles. And also, the big question that early adopters of Tesla are asking themselves is, how much are the new batteries? I rest my case for the moment.
Anyway, Michael, it's Wall Street, and you know what they say about Wall Street? Money never sleeps. And that's what we have as regards the share price of Rivian. But thank you so much. Really appreciate you, Michael, for your time. We'll take a short break. When we come back, okay, we go straight directly to Adesu Omora. We talk COVID-19 pandemic. Adesu, great to have you here.
Good morning, Rufai. Thank you so much. Good morning, Tunu, and good morning, Dr. Bati.
Morning.
Good morning.
Well, morning, guys, and morning to our viewers. Well, more and more, the pandemic is beginning to look like the pandemic for the vaccinated, as more countries are easing up restrictions for those that are vaccinated, and others are attempting to increase uptake of the vaccines in their country. France has become the latest country to issue boosters as health passes health pass, yes, for those over 65 in the country. So if you're 65 and above and you live in France, you would have to have taken a booster shot to gain entry into social events and social places and public places in France. Well, very quickly, let's look at the data. Although Johns Hopkins University tally provides us a glance of the data released by countries, but as always, at this time of the week, we have a further breakdown by the WHO Epidemiological Weekly Report. And coronavirus deaths rose by 10% in Europe in the last week, making it the only world region where both cases and deaths are surging. It's the 6th consecutive week we are seeing cases rise in Europe. There were about 3.1 million infections in total globally, and that's about a 1% rise from the previous week. Now, nearly two-thirds of that number, two-thirds of 3.1 million cases were in Europe alone. On country basis, the highest numbers of new cases worldwide were from the United States, Russia, Britain, Turkey, and Germany. In Southeast Asia and Africa, cases remained unchanged from previous week. However, COVID-19 deaths in those regions of the world are declining. They declined by a third, according to this WHO weekly report. And globally, COVID deaths were down by 4%. So that's some good news, I guess. Over 7 billion doses of vaccines have been administered globally. Now, here in Nigeria, 65 cases and unfortunately 8 COVID-19 related deaths were reported in the last 24 hours. 9 states and the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, were responsible for this latest tally. The NCDC says Abuja is, however, reporting a backlog of cases from November 8th, about 10 cases as a result of a backlog from Abuja here. Now, over 5.7 million individuals have received the first dose of coronavirus vaccines in Nigeria, and another 3.1 million individuals have received 2 jabs, which means they are fully vaccinated. But these are numbers from the targeted population of a population the country hopes to vaccinate against this virus. The NPHCDA, which is the on ground and is expecting more doses. So if you're 18 and above, vaccines remain free. Go out and have a shot. Away from Nigeria, Guinea has become the first West African nation to vaccinate children aged 12 to 17 against COVID-19. According to the Health Ministry, shipments of Pfizer and Moderna vaccines received between October and this month will be used in the exercise. However, we're not told where these shipments came from or how many doses, but in Conakry today, children aged between 12 and 17 years of age, of course, will get a jab of coronavirus vaccines. Let's go to China, where a city on the border with Russia, it's called Heiho, is turning to unconventional means to control a surge in coronavirus cases. Now, it's offering a reward of, listen to this, it's actually offering 100,000 yuan, which is equivalent to $15,000, to anyone who can help trace the origins of the current outbreak. City officials in Heiho have declared it a people's war against the virus as cases across China continue to rise. China is currently seeing a 4th wave of the virus. In Israel is taking a lead again. In a world's first, the country is to hold a national drill today to prepare for future COVID variants. Now, with virus numbers down, Prime Minister Naftali Bennett says the country is not packing up management bodies and pandemic fighting forces just yet. The drill is to be run from a simulation room in Jerusalem, and of course, it will deal with coordinating various high-level officials and bodies to prepare for a new COVID strain they have nicknamed the Omega strain of the virus, for the purpose of the exercise, of course. And finally, this is some disturbing news. The WHO is warning there could be a shortfall of up to 2 billion syringes needed to administer COVID-19 vaccines next year. Now, the Supply and Access Medicines Group of the WHO is asking national health authorities across the world to check their needs well in advance to avoid hoarding and panic buying that was seen early in the pandemic. Back to you guys.
Okay, let's start with Guinea. Guinea, you said, is the first West African country to introduce vaccination for 12 to 17 years old. And of course, the other 2 countries in Africa that have done that are South Africa and also Morocco. But it follows a pattern that we've seen internationally, either in Europe or in Latin America, in Brazil, in Mexico, or even in Israel. And the whole idea is to expand the scope of the population that will be fully vaccinated. Guinea, Conakry, has been able to immunize up to about 2.2 million persons, a significant percentage, about 5.6% of the population, using, vaccines from China, Russia, and also, the consignment they got in September from the COVAX Alliance. Now, the question is, okay, when is Nigeria also going to expand that net, considering the fact that we're the most populous country on the continent, and also considering the fact that only about 15 countries in Africa has been able to achieve between 40% to 60% full vaccination of its population. And that includes Comoros Island, Cape Verde, Seychelles, Mauritius, Cape Verde, and these are relatively, smaller countries compared to Africa. But I think that the big problem that Nigeria has to, or rather that African countries have to worry about, is what was announced by WHO the other day, that the world is going to face a shortage of syringes. These auto-disposable syringes, the 0.3 milliliters syringe that is used for the Moderna vaccine, and the 0.5 milliliters syringe. So the WHO is calling on syringe manufacturers to ramp up production. But the fear, as has been expressed by the WHO Africa Regional Director, Dr. Moeti, is that African countries are likely to be impacted. So even when some of these countries, before the first quarter of 2022, get a better supply of vaccines, how would they, administer those vaccines if there is a shortage of syringes? Because what is used is not the regular syringe. Is this auto-disposable, yes, self-disposable, if you like, syringes? Now, you raised the point about Israel. Well, I think the Israeli example is very interesting. Israel is trying to prepare even for the next wave, if it were to happen. They call it, for the purposes of the exercise that begins today, the Omega variant. And it's basically about a simulation of different scenarios. There's a group called the CEPI, the Center for Epidemic Innovation Preparedness. And what you find at a national level is a country that has survived the fourth wave of the pandemic, trying to even look ahead into the future and prepare for it. Finally, Europe, yes, it's true. The WHO, Europe director says that Europe has become, again, the epicenter of the outbreak. Well, what are the reasons? Perhaps the Delta variant, perhaps the fact that many of the European countries, didn't get onto the game early enough in mobilizing, and also perhaps the fact that, well, maybe geopolitics is involved. But what it means is that, many of those European countries, WHO lists 61 of them and says that, look, on the average, in many of those countries, from Germany to Hungary, you've had an increase of about between 7% and 10%. When you look at the total, infection cases in the last week or so of about 3.1 million cases globally. So whereas the seroprevalence is going down in most parts of the world, in Europe, we have witnessed in the last 6 weeks an upsurge. So that's a challenge for policymakers and governments across Europe.
Right. Okay, Adeswa, so for me, some cherry and good news, and I keep trying to look at the good news in all of this COVID pandemic. Valneva, the French pharmaceutical, has been successful with their vaccine. In fact, the EU has made orders for their vaccine. So that's just adding more to the vaccine kitty. I think Valneva developed out of England, and they had a factory production site out of England, and that was successful with them. So more vaccines getting out there. But most importantly, I think we should take lessons for Israel. And that's what we've always called for, scenario planning. To be able to envisage a scenario, iterate solutions to it and plan. It's helped businesses all over the world, and that's what we should do as regards all of that. So for me, the next conversation I want to put on the front burner is, since we're in the West, Nigeria is in the West now, we're pitching and all of that, I do not think, or correct me if I'm wrong, we're having enough conversations with possible vaccination manufacturing companies. So if it won't be out of place, why can't we see the first set of investments by, vaccination manufacturing plants in Nigeria? So if possible, our delegations in the West talking trade and investment, if they could pick up a meeting with maybe the executives of Valneva, for instance, that has a vaccine that has been tested and in fact started getting orders, why can't we get, production up and going? Because you see, it saddens my heart that the major vaccine mix still comes from places like India when they don't have the time advantages like we have. We are 6 hours to Europe. We should be able to turn out the vaccine and get it on a plane out to Europe in 6 hours threshold. But what happens is the fact that you still depend on places like India that takes hours and hours to get to Europe. So we have time proximity Isn't it time for us, to be more hardline as regards having those conversations with vaccine manufacturing plants to come to Africa, get it 6 hours away? In fact, it's not even every area that is 6 hours away. Areas like North Africa is about 2-3 hours away to Europe. So look at the possibility on the African continent. Africa is strategic, is the last frontier, and it might just help, with that vaccine production drive that we need. Thank you so much, Adesu. I really appreciate you for your time.